Hello, my name is Brant, spelled B-R-A-N-T, Hunt, H-U-N-T. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. Today is the 8th day of January, 2026. And I'm going to be reading from the book called Kabbalah and Exodus. And the particular chapter I'm going to be reading from is chapter 6. And this is the chapter 6 title is simply called Moments of Grace. Which is from Exodus 3. Okay, again, moments of grace, Exodus 3. You see, the whole idea, let me just say this real quick. The whole idea in what the word Exodus means is to leave Egypt. Egypt is a physical world. And what we want to do is go to the spiritual world, which is a moment of grace, would be Exodus. We want to Exodus, we want to leave Egypt. Okay, we want to leave the physical manifestation that is who we are and go into what they call the spiritual realm. Okay, that's what the whole book is about. Exodus is to leave Egypt, to move out and go. Let's leave this area of Egypt. Now, this is in a way, is a story revealing what it takes to do that. You see. So when Moses came to Jethro, he was in Egyptian clothes. This tells us that despite his time with the Ethiopians and in the desert, he still used the persona of his upbringings, that is, quote, his ego, which corresponds with knowledge of the body and the foundation of the psyche, was so overlaid with the cultural and habits he had acquired during his time at Pharaoh's court that he was initially taken as a natural but sophisticated man. In other words, he was no longer, he had gone back to what we call in the physical realm in a way, you see. However, because he proved to be of a supernatural order, he was accepted for esoteric instructions under Jethro, who required Moses not to leave without his consent. Let me see if I can find something here for you in this little book here. Let me show you one other thing. This is what we're talking about here. Let's see if I can show you a little bit better so I can make sure it comes clear. This is the book here. This is called Kabbalah. This is all Kabbalah in here. You see that? One's got a right side, one has a left side. One side is the pillar of mercy. The other one is the pillar of suffering, so to speak. And this is the pillar part of it here, you see. And we're talking about that here, all right? So let's check in this particular book here if I can find Jethro's name in here and see what it means, if it's here, if it is in here, okay? So I don't know. I did not check before I started this broadcast. So Jethro means, in Hebrew, means preeminence. It's based upon Exodus chapter 3, verses 1. And what it means simply is reliance. Okay, that's what it means. That's what his name means, reliance in the metaphysical world. Okay, this is again the book I'm getting this from. There is what we call Kessler's Publishers. Bought this book probably a year ago, if not longer. Very good book. Not that big, though. So let's get back to the reading here. Moses can rely on Jethro, you see. However, because he proved to be of a supernatural order, he was accepted for esoteric instructions under Jethro, who required Moses not to leave without his consent. The marriage was part of the rule of a commitment to an esoteric teacher. Moses was then given his first task of watching over the early young flock of Jethro's sheep. Later, he was to watch over the older and then the most mature flocks, seeing both to their nourishment and protection. So this is the flocks with these sheep, and Jethro said, "Okay, you take care of my sheep here." And first, we're going to deal with the young ones who are very young. So you need to be careful. You need to be, reliant, and then you, if you can pass that test, you can go to the older ones and the more mature flock. You see. Now, a shepherd in biblical literature is an allegory for a teacher or instructor. That's correct. And Talmudic commentary draws this idea out in saying that God wished to train Moses in the desert so as to lead the Christians, to lead the children of Israel through this same region. During these years with Jethro, Moses learned much about the terrain and the vegetables and the animal kingdom. In an analog, he studied the actions of the elementary world within and without himself, and the problems and solutions of both his own vegetable and animal nature about himself, you see. Together with acquiring the skills in ordering a group of creatures that were easily panicked and could never see beyond their noses. Okay, so this is a critical adjective he uses here. This is, you're going to see this in enormously about what happens with the children of Israel when they get out into the wilderness. Because first of all, they panic. Okay, and that's true of a sheep. They will panic. Okay, so they are not what we call mature. In fact, they will follow the many. They will leap off of a cliff, so to speak, if the other ones go ahead of it, you see. And they couldn't see beyond their noses. In other words, they don't have any, they're completely brain dead in a lot of ways. There are several stories of Moses' strictness and compassion, his discipline in a tight corner, and his ability to choose the right places for his charges to test and feed. To rest and feed. Over the 40 years, another key ingredient here, the 40, number 40 is what we call the halfway point somewhat in our midlives. So this is how we, in a way, the first 40 years is basically in what we call immaturity and gradually leading to maturity. And the 40 years onward is to lead to even more immaturity in your life. He is reported to have been under Jethro's tutelage. Moses lost not a sheep and indeed increased and improved the flock, thus proving himself to Jethro and to God. By the time Moses was ready for the next stage of his development, the Lord, the scriptures state, noted that Israel had reached its limits of suffering under a new Pharaoh. It was then they recall the covenant between God and the forefathers and cried out for deliverance. That is the psyche and slavery to the body called up to the spiritual and divine worlds for help. So you see, again, it's not a figurative story. I mean, it's not a physical story, but it's a figurative story. It is revealing here a spiritual story. You see, it had it, the psyche in them is enslaved. It's always enslaved to the body. And it's time to move up to the upper worlds, if you say. And the upper world is up here in your head. You see? So worlds for help. Teacher is called, was heard. Exodus 3:1 says, quote, "Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the flank of the desert and came to the area of what we call Har Ha-Elohim, mountain of the divine, to Horeb, Horeb. Horeb means solitude, desolation, and many other translations associated with a state of being just prior to a mystical experience. Let's see what this. Let's look at this book again and see what it has here with the word Horeb. I'm just kind of curious. I haven't looked at it, so I don't know what it's going to say here. Okay, it says here from Hebrew, Mount of God, Horeb, based again upon Exodus 3:1, silent communion. Interesting, isn't it? Again, that's a metaphysical definition of the word Horeb, which was the name of the mountain. And most of us don't even look at these things, you see. Never did. When we read the Bible, we just think, oh, this is the name. Well, there's a significance behind it, you see. And many other translations associate with a state of being just prior to a mystical experience. And so what they're saying here in this part here, this junction, if I can find it again. It's silent communion, so they're at peace with themselves. They're in peace. There, Ra, Malkul, that is Yahweh Alu, the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a thorn bush. Traditionally, this angel, or archangel to be precise, is Michael, who the rabbinical commentary tells us descended from the place of the Shanakayan, or divine presence to manifest the spirit of the divinity below. Kabbalistically, this is grace, as it comes down from the place where these what we call the three upper worlds meet, to the place where three lower worlds meet, at the self, in the center of the psyche. Here Moses perceived, while none with him could, the burning bush that did not consume itself. That is, it was recreated as it burnt, I should say. The spiritual level, that of creation, is the meeting ground between God and man. When Moses turned aside to see this miraculous event, Elohim called to him by name from the midst of the thorn bush, quote, that is in parentheses, I should say, which is considered by the rabbis as the lowest form of that kind of vegetable life, indicating the divine presence is in everything. Brackets ended. The use of Moses' name is crucial because it speaks of a high level of individuality which must be reached in order to be able to experience revelation. Moses replied, quote, "Here am I," end quote. That is, he was fully present. This fact is very important because many a person experiencing such a moment sinks in panic, just like a sheep would do, and to a lesser rate of state, I should say, not rate, lesser state of consciousness or even unconsciousness. God then instructed Moses not to come too close, but take off his shoes because he is on Atman Kodesh, which is holy ground. Let me see if that word's in there too. I'm curious. I don't know. It might be a word the author brought in or not. I'm just reading it just as you are. The first time I read it here, folks. Let's see, here we go. Now I got to find the word here again. No, it does not show that word. No, so we won't do that. Okay. So we're back over here. Okay, holy ground. The Hebrew word Kodesh, Kodesh, also means, quote, that which is separated and special, end quote. In other words, the place was not of ordinary earth. It was the highest level of physical experience. This corresponds to the keter, or crown of the physical tree that meets the temporal of the psyche and the makuk, or kingdom of the spirit in the self. Here God says that, quote, I am the God of thy father, is Amram, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now, notice that was interesting here. 3 different names here: God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, and of thy father Amram. This is Yusuf, Hesed, Jerah, and Tephel, or the ego that has retained its memory of the divine in the soul triad. At this introduction to divinity, Moses hid his face. It's got here, I'll see if I can pronounce these words for you. Kelg, Yareh, Maccabi, El, Ha, Elohim, or he feared to look up into the divine, end quote. The oral tradition inserts between this moment of coming into the divine presence and God speaking about the plight of the children of Israel, an account of Moses' ascent into the upper worlds, where he is shown the divine scheme of things. While this material comes down to apocryphal fragments written in Greek or Aramaic in the 1st century of the Common Era, its substance is possibly much older. In it, Metatron, alias the translated Enoch, the angel of the presence at the crown of creation, takes Moses up into Beriah, the world of pure spirit, accompanied by thousands of celestial beings to the left and right of them for protection against the vast cosmic forces that work in creation. For the trip, Moses is temporarily transformed into a fiery state so that he can move freely at the same level as Metron through the higher worlds. The conversion of his flesh into fire also indicates a state of illumination that is being illuminated. During this ascension, now notice the word ascension, that's the same thing that happened to Christ. You see, that's the same word. Jesus ascended to heaven, you see. During this ascension, Moses is shown purgatory and its various degrees of punishment, and paradise and its thrones of reward. He sees the other worldly beauty of Eden and heaven, and experiences the profound ecstasy that is reserved for those who perform spiritual work. He is shown the unfolding of the divine plan, the history of Israel, the building, destruction, and the rise of the temple, and the coming of the Messiah in the eyes and the end of the days. He's made acquainted with the purpose of his life and how he will continue teaching even after earthly death. Such moments of revelation are not unknown to accompany deep interior illumination. Suddenly, upon coming into the presence of the divine in the self, the being of the individual is raised for a period lasting from a few seconds to several days. During this time, the consciousness is lifted right out of the mundane to climb to the pinnacle of incarnated human experience at the crown of the psychological tree, which simultaneously the temporal of the spiritual tree of creation and Makuk of Azillah, the divine world of imagination. Imagination. Here, the person glimpses into creation and sees its workings throughout the lower worlds. There are many accounts of this kind of experience in Jewish, Christian, and Mohammedanism literature. So you see, these words are used in these 3 major religions. Both the Revelation of St. John, Muhammad's night journey into heaven, describes such inner excursions. Time and space change dimensions, and the phenomena of the physical world fades in comparison to the richness and powers of the upper worlds as the vision extends in all directions, including the remote past and the distant future. It is often likened to standing on a high mountain and seeing in an overview all the events beneath that have happened and will happen. It was upon the holy mountain that Moses stood and heard God's voice speak of the children of Israel in bondage below in Egypt. And so what is given the illustration in chapter 6 here is the illustration in why we're on a pilgrimage. That is, our life is a pilgrimage to finding the truth. That is what we should be doing here on this planet. Unfortunately, most people are unaware of that. Most people are caught up in what I've called the physical world. How much do we have to make money for? How do I provide for my family, such and such? How do I do this thing? And there is, in some ways, there's little time for people because they're all involved in that or gratifying themselves, so to speak, you see. So thank you for listening. This was, again, like I said, this is from the book, um, dealing with Kabbalah and Exodus. And so the idea, you see what's going on here. This is a transition from Egypt being the physical world into the promised land, which is the spiritual world. That's what it's talking about here in a slow process. So we're in this tonight, chapter 6, that is. And again, thank you for listening. And I wish you a good evening. I appreciate you listening, like I said. And I wish you good for the next day. And may you have a good evening and take care. Thank you for listening. Again, my channel, Simply Discerning What is True. If you'd like to know more about this, there's a gentleman who's very good at understanding this stuff, far better than I have, who's been illuminated or ascended. His name is Phil Langdon. And you can find him on YouTube also with doing these videos by himself, explaining these things. And he's done many, many books also. All right. And in fact, one of those books, if I could show you real quickly here, is called The Ascension Code. This is one of the few books he started. I think this is probably one of the first books he put out. He did other books also. He's done books on the whole idea of Zeptepi also. I think he's written probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 books. I'm guessing that. Don't quote me on that. So thank you again for listening. Take care and have a good evening.